Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Gamester here. This is the quick guide for Heroic Iron Quan in Throne of Thunder. As usual, if you just want the full guide with more information, click on the annotation on screen. And with that, let's get started. So for your raid composition, you can use 1 or 2 tanks, first and foremost. And this depends basically on whether you have a paladin in your raid. Especially if your tank is a paladin, you can easily one tank this encounter. And doing so will free up extra DPS and or healing depending on what your other tank is spec'd into. So that'll help quite a bit. So basically this tank will use Hand of Protection or Divine Shield to get rid of the stacks of Impale that will apply during the fight. And usually you'll want to do this once per dog phase, and that pretty much will allow the tank to be healed easily throughout the rest of the fight. Other than that, 2 to 3 healers, pretty standard stuff. Especially if you're one tanking, I would strongly recommend 3 healers if you're learning this fight, because there can be some spike damage in the first and the last phase in particular. So as you begin the fight, you will face Rorschach just like normal, and the only difference is on Heroic, when you get each dog to 25% health, they'll go away, and you have to fight them all at the end together, pretty much. So Rorschach still deals all the same basic abilities. The idea here is to split up your group into roughly 3 groups of 3 to 4 players each. When it's time for one group to stack up and soak up the flame attack, they'll do so and go up to 3 stacks of the debuff, at which point they spread out again, and the next group in the rotation stacks up and gets their 3 stacks. So for us, we have our melee stack up initially. Once they get 3 stacks, we wait for the first throw spear to go out. And then the second group, which is my group here, ranged group, stacks up, and the 3 of us get up to 3 stacks. We spread out after that and wait for the next throw spear to go out. And then the third group, which is the other ranged group, stacks up on the other side and gets 3 stacks. And then by the time the third group is done, the initial group, melee in our case, has cleared their stacks and they can reset and do it again. So just keep this rotation going. The only trick, of course, is making sure your melee are allowed to stay spread apart far enough so that they don't stack up too much. So the best thing to do is to have your melee in a triangle formation at max range. The other thing to be aware of is that on all phases during Heroic, while you have one dog active, one of the other dog's abilities will be used on the raid. So during the first dog, for example, you get the lightning storm attack as well as a whirlwind attack on the raid. So it's important that you have players assigned to basically partner up. So if they get lightning storm, their partner can quickly click them and just be right in that area. So your ranged and your non-monk healers should all have a partner and be roughly on the same quadrant or side of the boss throughout the fight. Once phase 2 begins on Quet'zal, you again want to stay near your partner so you can click off the lightning debuff. But otherwise, this phase is pretty simple. There's not a lot of damage, and the only danger really is the windstorm, which is just starting here. So just like in normal, you'll want to run toward the entrance of the room, toward the west, using any sprints or movement boosts you have. And make sure your healers especially wait to use their massive heal cooldowns until they get outside of the wind. Otherwise, the healing will be reduced a great deal. So as you saw, as a monk, I roll out of it. Make sure you just move in the same pattern every time because the tornadoes are always going to start and move in the same pattern as well. So once you find a particular path or method that you can use to get out of windstorm, you can repeat it every single time. And it's pretty simple to do that. You'll also want to use damage reduction cooldowns on the raid when windstorm is about to hit, because the lightning will generally be chaining from a ranged player onto the rest of the raid as you get sucked in. So save your big heal cooldowns until you get out of the storm, just the healer, not the rest of the raid, and use your damage reduction cooldowns just before or just as soon as the storm starts. Once you're at the entrance from the first windstorm, then you just want to stay over here to avoid the tornadoes, just like normal. So we generally have the north and the south roughly split up between our ranged and healers, so that again the spears only apply to one side and players are partnered with someone else to click off the lightning debuff. So the third phase against Dameron is the easiest by far. This is where your healers should regenerate their mana in preparation for the end. There's very little damage to deal with. The only extra on Heroic here is that the Rorschach fire debuff will still be applied to the largest group of players during this phase. So usually that will be your melee. However, while Dameron's active, this is not applied so frequently that the stacks will increase. So generally he'll cast it under melee, they'll take a bit of spike damage, and then the debuff will drop and he'll cast it again on the melee, and so on. If you do not have enough players stacked up, however, he may cast it on a random single player and potentially kill them. So it's just best in this phase, if possible, to have your melee grouped up so that you can soak up that damage. Now, once you get Dameron to 25%, the next phase will begin, which respawns all the other dogs along with Iron Quan at the same time. So your tank will need to pick up all 4 targets and tank them on top of each other. At this point, it's sort of a burn. You want to burn the dangerous dogs down quickly while leaving the other ones that are less dangerous to the end. So generally speaking, you want to focus your DPS on Rorschach first, because he will use all his main abilities, which basically means the fire AE will be cast on grouped up players. So rather than doing the 3-person rotation, because there's a lot going on in this phase, it's best to just have a bunch of players stack up in melee. If you have enough melee DPS, along with your tank, Monk Healer is another player that can stack up, then those players can just soak up the fire debuffs long enough for your raid to finish off Rorschach. Once he's dead, no more will be applied. So that's the best way to do it if you have enough melee to soak that up. Usually you'll want 4, maybe 5 players to be able to do that. And otherwise, once Rorschach is dead, then just finish off the other dogs. Doesn't really matter the order at this point. Depending on your DPS, you may get a fist smash, as you see here, from Iron Quan during the dogs phase here. So this is a good time to use any raid cooldowns, at least one raid cooldown, to mitigate some of the damage or increase your healing, because there's going to be lightning and other effects that are still active on the raid. So once you kill all the dogs, you'll just stay here in this final phase against Iron Quan. And this is essentially a softened rage mechanic, just like in normal, where every time you fist smash, he does more and more damage to the raid. So the first thing you need to make sure is that players that are ranged targets and therefore have lightning applied to them do not get near any other player until the lightning is gone. If you're too quick to move into melee range, you'll spread lightning to the rest of the raid and cause a lot of extra damage. So stay spread out until you're certain that all the dogs are dead and you have no more lightning debuff on you. Once the lightning's all gone, the rest of your raid can pretty much stack up. We kind of use a small triangle in melee formation because when he initially throws his spear before he smashes the ground, it does an AE around the target player. So you don't want to be quite stacked up completely because you'll take extra damage. But basically we're all in melee, and then you can use pretty efficient AE heals, and otherwise just rotate your raid cooldowns for every raid smash, or every fist smash rather. And that's it. So we generally use Bloodlust at the start against the first dog, but if you don't have much trouble with that rotation, depending on your DPS, you might want to save Bloodlust for the last phase here, just to get through the fist smash stuff quickly. But otherwise, it's pretty easy encounter. So yeah, once you get the basic mechanics of the dogs down, you'll have Iron Quan on Heroic. As always, good luck, and thanks for watching.